People like you don't get to play house here. Crawl back where you came from.
Brenda Caldwell hurled her wine across Aaron's white suit.
Ma'am, this is my wedding.
Aaron said, calm.
Not for long.
She smiled as 2 patrol cars screeched up. 2 huge officers climbed out. Brenda waved them over like old friends.
That's him. The one I called about.
Sir, hands behind your back. This is my home.
They didn't listen. One slammed Aaron face first into his wedding cake. A knee hit his spine. Then Naomi moved. She shoved the officers off and pulled her husband up. Bride and officer locked eyes. Neither looked away. Aaron's fingers closed around the wedding ring in his pocket. Silent. Have you ever been treated like a criminal in your own home? 3 hours earlier, Wexford Hills had looked like a postcard. The neighborhood sat on the wealthy edge of Atlanta. Old oaks lined the street. White fences framed lawns clipped to the inch. For 60 years, the same families had lived behind those tall brick walls. Then, Aaron and Naomi Williams bought the house on the corner, and they became the first black couple ever to call Wexford Hills home. That morning, their backyard glowed. String lights hung between the trees. White roses spilled from every table. A string quartet tuned softly near the rose arch. Aaron stood at the center of it, and he looked like a man born for this day. He was tall, broad through the shoulders, with warm brown skin and a calm, steady gaze. His cream wedding suit fit him like it had been stitched to his frame. When he smiled, the whole yard seemed to lean toward him. Naomi was breathtaking. She wore a fitted ivory gown that traced every line of her, and her dark curls framed a face that turned heads in any room. But it was her eyes that held people. Calm, fearless. The eyes of a woman who had decided long ago that no one would ever make her small. They had met 4 years earlier, both too busy to date and both unable to walk away. Aaron never bragged about his work. When neighbors asked what he did, he only said, "Public service. I keep work and home separate." Naomi would smile and let the mystery sit. What few guests knew was that Aaron carried a weight most men never would. People in this city knew his name. They trusted it. But here, in his own backyard, he wanted to be nothing more than a groom. Just a man marrying the woman he loved. Their families filled the yard. Aaron's mother, Ruth Williams, moved between tables, fixing collars and kissing cheeks. She had raised Aaron alone in a cramped apartment across town. Now she watched her son marry in a neighborhood she had once only cleaned houses to dream about. She squeezed her son's hand once and whispered, "Your father would be proud." Aaron nodded, unable to speak. Not everyone smiled. Across the fence, Brenda Caldwell watched from her patio. She had moved to Wexford Hills only months before, and she wore wealth like armor. Her neon pink blazer was sharp and expensive. Her blonde hair was flawless. She was, by any measure, a beautiful woman. But her beauty had a cold edge, the kind that curdled the moment her smile dropped. She did not like what she saw. Too many cars, too many strangers, too many faces that did not look like hers. "This neighborhood is changing," she muttered to no one, sipping her wine. Earlier that morning, she had already shown her teeth. When a young guest parked near her driveway, Brenda had marched out fast. "Move it!" she snapped. "This is a respectable street." The guest apologized and moved. Brenda watched him go, lips pressed thin. To her, every new face was a threat to a world she believed belonged to people like her. A doorbell camera blinked on her porch. Another glowed above Aaron's garage. Phones rested in 100 pockets, ready to record. None of them knew it yet, but every second of that day would be captured from a dozen angles. Inside the yard, Aaron checked his watch and glanced at the gate. "He's late," he told Naomi. "Who?" "A friend from work, Daniel. Good man. You'll like him." Naomi laughed. "As long as he doesn't bring his radio." Minutes before, Naomi had pulled him close behind the rose arch. "Nervous?" she whispered. "Only about stepping on your dress," he said. She laughed, soft and sure. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Neither of them guessed how soon that promise would be tested. Aaron grinned, but did not answer. He patted his jacket pocket where 2 gold rings waited in a velvet box. 4 years of love came down to this hour, this yard, this woman. He had no idea that the happiest day of his life was about to become the worst. Across the fence, Brenda set down her glass. Her eyes narrowed as another car parked along the curb, and 3 more guests stepped out laughing. She picked up her phone. Her manicured thumb hovered over 3 numbers. "Enough," she whispered. Then she dialed. The 911 dispatcher answered on the second ring. "911, what's your emergency?" Brenda's voice came out sharp and breathless, performed. "There's a man in my neighborhood, black male. He broke into one of the houses, and now there's a huge crowd, 30, maybe 40 people. I think some of them are armed." "Ma'am, are you safe?" "No, I'm terrified. They're loud, they're aggressive, and I am a woman alone. Please send someone, now." She gave the address in a trembling tone she did not feel. Then she hung up and smiled. None of it was true. There was no break-in, no weapons, no threat. Only a wedding, she had decided, did not belong on her street. But the words black male and armed travel fast through a dispatch system. Within 90 seconds, 2 units were rolling toward Wexford Hills with their adrenaline already climbing. In the lead car, Officer Cole Bennett drove fast, jaw tight. He had worn the badge 3 years and carried a folder of complaints he was sure were unfair. To him, every call was a chance to prove he was right. The word armed sat in his chest like fuel. Beside him, Officer Garrett Pruitt read the same call and felt only unease. Something about it was too clean. But he said nothing. He rarely did. What the crowd could not know was that this was not Bennett's first call like this. 2 complaints already sat in his file, both quietly buried, both involving black men who said he had moved too fast and listened too little. Each time, the report had been smoothed over. Each time, he had walked away certain he was the one who had been wronged. In the backyard, the ceremony was about to begin. The quartet lifted their bows. Guests found their seats. Ruth dabbed her eyes. Naomi stood at the end of the aisle, radiant, waiting for the music that would carry her to Aaron. Then, the sirens cut through the roses. 2 patrol cars braked hard at the curb. Doors flew open. The music stumbled and died. Every head turned toward the street as the 2 officers strode across the lawn, hands near their belts, eyes sweeping the crowd like it was a crime scene. Bennett was young, maybe late 20s, with a square jaw and a chip on his shoulder you could see from across the yard. Pruitt, broader and older, hung a step behind, watching the faces instead of the threat. "Everybody stay where you are," Bennett barked. "Nobody move." 100 guests froze in their wedding clothes. Aaron stepped forward, calm and open-handed. "Officers, I'm Aaron Williams. This is my home. We're having a wedding. How can I help you?" Bennett looked him up and down, slow and openly contemptuous. He took in the suit, the rings, the crowd, and decided none of it added up. "Your home," Bennett repeated, like it was a punchline. "We got a call about a break-in. Armed suspect. Large crowd. He smirked. You match the description. What description? Aaron asked evenly. You know what description. The words landed like a slap. A murmur ran through the guests. A few lifted their phones. Naomi crossed the lawn, fast gown gathered in one fist. There's no break-in. This is our house. We have the deed, the permits, everything. This is our wedding day. Bennett did not even look at her. Sir, I need to see some ID. Now. Aaron kept his voice level. It's inside. I'll walk you there. My name is on the deed and the mortgage. I have lived here 8 months. Sure it is, Bennett said. Pruitt let out a short laugh behind him. That laugh did something to the yard. Guests who had stayed quiet began to rise. An uncle stood. The best man, Wesley Brooks, moved toward the aisle. A bridesmaid started recording, openly. Aaron lifted one hand to calm them, never raising his voice. Everyone, please, stay seated. Let's keep this simple. He turned back to Bennett. I will cooperate fully, but understand me. There is no crime here. There never was. Bennett stepped closer into Aaron's space, using his height like a weapon. What I understand is that I got a call and you fit it. Rented suit, big house, big party. People like you don't just end up in a place like this. The insult was naked now. Gasps rippled outward. Ruth pressed a hand to her chest. Wesley took another step and froze when Pruitt's hand drifted toward his belt. People like me, Aaron said softly. It was not a question. It was a door closing. 2 houses down, an older neighbor named Harold Vance came out onto his porch. He had lived in Wexford Hills for 40 years, and he had met Aaron the week the couple moved in. That man is no criminal, he called, his voice shaking. He carried my groceries in last month. Officer, you have got this wrong. Bennett ignored him. So Harold raised his own phone and started to record, his hands trembling with anger. Across the fence, Brenda watched it all with her arms folded and a thin smile on her face. This was exactly what she had wanted. She lifted her own phone and began to film, certain she was capturing the moment her street was set right. She had no idea she was recording the evidence that would one day end her. Bennett turned on the crowd. Phones off! All of you! Nobody obeyed. If anything, more phones rose, a dozen red dots glowing in the afternoon light. On Aaron's garage, the doorbell camera caught everything in crisp color. So did Brenda's. So did the bridesmaid's screen, and the uncle's and Harold's from across the street. Later, investigators would stitch all these angles into a single, damning timeline. But in the moment, all anyone felt was the slow, sick certainty that something terrible was coming, and no badge would stop it. A little flower girl began to cry, and her mother pulled her close and turned her gently away from the officers. Even the smallest guests could feel it. Something sacred was breaking in that yard, and the men in uniform did not seem to care. Sir, Bennett said, swinging back to Aaron, I'm going to ask one more time. ID, or we do this the hard way? Aaron held his gaze and made his voice as steady as he could. Officer Bennett, I am giving you one chance to slow down. Call your supervisor. Run this address. Find out who lives here before you make a mistake you cannot undo. Something flickered in Pruitt's eyes. The older officer keyed his radio, low, almost a whisper. Dispatch, confirm the homeowner on this address. Static answered. Then a pause. Then a voice came back that made Pruitt go pale.
But Bennett was already moving, and he did not hear a word of it. "Bennett," Pruitt said quickly. "Bennett, wait!" "We wait for nothing," Bennett snapped. He was committed now, too proud to back down in front of 40 phones. "He's stalling. They always stall." Naomi stepped between the two men, fearless. "Don't you put a hand on him." "Ma'am, step back or you go in too." "Naomi," Aaron said quietly, "it's all right. Let them see exactly what this is." Her heart slammed against her ribs, but she refused to let it show. She had grown up being told to shrink, to soften, to smile through insult, and she had buried that habit years ago. Now, she stood at her own wedding, watching strangers treat her husband like prey. The only thing holding her steady was the look Aaron gave her. "Trust me. Not yet." He was doing the hardest thing a man can do. He stayed calm while being humiliated in front of everyone he loved on the one day that was meant to be his. He thought of his mother in the second row. He thought of the years he had spent earning a name in this city. He kept his hands open and his voice soft because he knew any other choice would be twisted and used against him. He also knew something Bennett did not. He knew exactly how this would end once the truth came out. And still, he gave the young officer every chance to stop. Bennett reached for his cuffs. The metal caught the sun. Ruth cried out his name. The quartet sat frozen, bows still raised. 100 guests held their breath at once. Near the back, a phone live stream ticked past 2,000 viewers, then 5,000, the number climbing as fast as the dread. And in his jacket pocket, untouched, 2 gold wedding rings waited in their velvet box for a ceremony that would never start on time. "Turn around," Bennett said. "Now." Aaron did not turn around. He did not resist either. He simply stood, hands open, and said one last time, "Officer, please, run the address first." That was all it took. "Have it your way," Bennett growled. He grabbed Aaron by the collar and drove him forward. The groom's knees hit the gift table, then his chest, then his face went down into 3 tiers of white wedding cake frosting, smearing across his cheek as a knee slammed into his spine. The yard exploded. Ruth screamed her son's name and tried to push through the chairs. 2 guests caught her before she fell. Wesley lunged and was shoved back by Pruitt. Harold shouted from across the street, his phone still up. 100 voices rose at once, and over all of it came the cold click of handcuffs, locking around the wrists of a man on his own wedding day. "You are under arrest," Bennett said, breathing hard. "Suspicion of breaking and entering. You have the right to remain silent." Aaron's cheek pressed into the ruined cake. He did not shout. He did not beg. He only spoke low enough that only Bennett could hear. "You are making a mistake you cannot undo." "They all say that too," Bennett muttered. Then Naomi moved. She crossed the space in 3 steps, shoved both officers off her husband with a strength that startled them, and pulled him up out of the wreckage of their cake. Frosting streaked his suit. The look on his face was worse than any wound. She wrapped her arms around him, turned, and locked eyes with the young officer who had done this. Bride and officer stared at each other. Neither looked away. "You will remember this moment," Naomi said quietly, "for the rest of your life." Bennett blinked, thrown for half a second.
Then his pride took over again. "Cuffs stay on. He's coming in." He seized Aaron's arm and started marching him toward the patrol car. The crowd parted, stunned, phones tracking every step. Aaron walked without a word, head high, frosting dripping from his jacket, the picture of a dignified man being dragged through his own celebration. By the fence, Brenda Caldwell finally smiled the way she had wanted to all afternoon. "See?" she called out, loud enough for the cameras. "I told you! They never belong here! Look at him! Caught!" She was still filming. She did not understand that she was narrating her own downfall, frame by frame, for an audience that would soon number in the millions. What no one in that yard fully grasped yet was how far this video would travel. By nightfall, the footage of a groom, face down in his own wedding cake, would be on every screen in the country. But that reckoning was still hours away. Pruitt caught up to Bennett at the car, voice tight and low. "Bennett, stop. I am telling you to stop." "What is your problem?" "The radio. Dispatch called it back. You did not hear what they said." "Then tell me on the way." Bennett opened the rear door and put a hand on Aaron's head to push him inside. He never finished the motion. A third vehicle rolled up the street, slow and unmarked, and stopped behind the patrol cars. The door opened. A man stepped out in a sharp gray suit, the kind worn by someone who gave orders, not someone who took them. He was older, with silver at his temples, and a badge clipped to his belt that caught every eye in the yard. The guests who knew him went silent first. Then the ripple spread. Bennett, still gripping Aaron's arm, glanced over, annoyed at the interruption. "Sir, this is an active scene. I need you to step back." The man did not step back. He walked straight across the lawn, eyes fixed on the handcuffed groom, covered in cake and humiliation. His face changed with every step. Confusion. Recognition. Then a horror so deep it drained the color from his skin. He stopped a few feet away and stared at the man in cuffs. "Daniel," Aaron said softly, "you're late." Sergeant Daniel Hayes did not answer. He could not. His mouth opened, then closed. His eyes went from the frosting on Aaron's collar to the cuffs on his wrists to Bennett's hand still shoving his head toward the car. Hayes had served under this man for 9 years. He had seen him command an entire city. Now he watched him kneel in the ruins of his own wedding. Then Hayes said the only word he could find, and it came out as barely a whisper. "Chief." The yard went utterly still. Bennett's hand froze on Aaron's head. Pruitt closed his eyes, and, somewhere in the silence, 100 phones kept recording as the young officer slowly, finally, began to understand what he had done. The word hung in the air like smoke. Chief. Bennett heard it, but did not believe it. His grip on Aaron's head loosened, then fell away. He looked at Hayes, then at the man in cuffs, then back at Hayes, searching for the joke. "What did you call him?" Hayes straightened, and his voice found its full weight. "Officer Bennett, you are looking at Chief Aaron Williams, Chief of Police, the man who runs this entire department. Your boss, my boss, the highest-ranking officer in this city." The yard did not gasp. It went silent in a way that was louder than any scream. 100 people, 100 phones, all frozen on the same impossible truth. Bennett's face drained white. "That is not... He does not... He was at a break-in." "There was no break-in," Hayes said. "You handcuffed the chief of police at his own wedding." For a long moment, Bennett could not move. Then his hands began to shake. He fumbled for his keys, dropped them, picked them up, and worked the cuffs off Aaron's wrists with clumsy, panicked fingers. "Chief, I did not know. The call said armed. It said break-in. I was just following the call. I swear, I did not know it was you." Aaron rubbed his wrists slowly. Frosting still clung to his collar. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, and that quiet was more frightening than any shout. "That is the problem, officer. You did not need to know it was me." He turned and faced the young man fully. "You needed to treat me the way you would want to be treated, the way the badge demands. And you didn't. Not because of the call. Because of my face. Chief, please, How many times did I ask you to slow down?" Aaron's voice stayed level.
How many times did I ask you to run the address, to call your supervisor? I gave you every chance a man can give. You took none of them." Bennett had no answer. None existed. Hayes stepped in, badge out, now addressing the two officers with the authority of rank. "Pruitt, Bennett, body cameras stay on. Do not touch them. Do not stop recording. Everything from this moment is evidence." Pruitt nodded, fast, almost relieved. He had tried. He had keyed that radio. He had said, "Wait," and he would say so, under oath, exactly as it happened. Aaron looked around his ruined wedding, the toppled cake, his weeping mother, his bride with frosting on her ivory gown, the faces of people he loved, all of them, filming, all of them shaking. And for one breath, the calm cracked, and the guests saw not a chief, but a man who had just been broken in front of everyone he loved. Then he closed his eyes, drew a breath, and the chief returned. He reached into his jacket, not for the rings this time, for his phone. He dialed a number he knew by heart and lifted it to his ear.
"This is Chief Williams, badge confirmation Alpha 93. I need internal affairs at my home address immediately. I want Deputy Chief Margaret Lawson personally. I have been the subject of a false police report and an unlawful arrest, and there are 2 officers and roughly 100 witnesses on scene." He paused. "Yes, my wedding. Send them now." He lowered the phone. The dispatcher on the other end had gone from confused to terrified in the span of 10 seconds, because every person in that building now understood whose afternoon had just been destroyed. Across the fence, Brenda Caldwell had stopped smiling. She had watched the whole reversal in real time, and the color had left her face, one shade at a time. The man she called a criminal was the most powerful officer in the city. The arrest she had cheered was now a crime with her fingerprints on it. Quietly, she began to back toward her own door phone, lowered, hoping to disappear before anyone remembered who made the call. "Ma'am." Aaron's voice stopped her cold. He did not raise it. He did not have to. "Stay where you are." Brenda froze with one hand on her gate. "You called this in," Aaron said. "You told them an armed man broke into a house. You told them you feared for your life. None of that was true, and it is all on record. You are going to stand right there and wait for the investigators just like everyone else." I was concerned," Brenda stammered. "I saw a crowd and You saw a black wedding," Aaron said, "and you decided it did not belong on your street." He let the words sit. "We will let the recording speak for itself. Yours, mine, and everyone else's." Brenda's mouth opened, but nothing came out. For the first time all day, she had no power in her voice. Naomi came to her husband's side and slipped her hand into his. Frosting and all, ruined suit and all, she stood with him the way she had promised, behind the rose arch, an hour and a lifetime ago. Ruth made her way forward too, tears streaming, and pressed her palm to her son's cheek. "I'm all right, Mama," Aaron said softly. "I promise. I'm all right." But the yard knew better. Something had been taken that no apology could give back. The first dance that would not happen on time. The vows interrupted by sirens. The memory of a groom face down in his own cake, now living forever on 1,000 screens. Hayes moved beside Aaron, his voice low and shaken. "Chief, I am so sorry. I should have been here. If I had been here 10 minutes earlier." "You're here now," Aaron said, "and I am going to need you to do this right. Not for me, for the next person
who does not happen to be the chief of police. Hayes swallowed and nodded. In the distance, new sirens rose, different from the first. These were not coming to make an arrest. They were coming to begin a reckoning. Deputy Chief Lawson was on her way, and with her came every camera, every report, and every question that Bennett and Brenda would spend the coming weeks trying and failing to answer. Aaron looked down at the wedding ring, still waiting in its box, untouched through all of it. He had come here to make a promise to the woman he loved. Instead, he was about to make a different kind of promise, to the truth, and he intended to keep it. The reckoning began before the sun went down. Deputy Chief Margaret Lawson arrived 20 minutes later in a dark sedan, 2 internal affairs investigators behind her. She had spent 18 years building a reputation no one could buy, and she took one look at the toppled cake, the weeping guests, and the 2 pale officers and understood exactly what kind of night this would be. "Chief," she said quietly, shaking Aaron's hand. "I'm sorry. We will do this by the book, every step."
"That's all I want," Aaron said. "By the book. The same book that should have protected me an hour ago." Lawson nodded and turned to her team. "Secure every body camera on scene. Collect every phone willing to share footage. Pull the doorbell cameras from both houses. And I want the original 911 audio in my hands tonight." The yard became a crime scene, though not the one Bennett had imagined. Investigators worked in careful lines. They bagged Bennett's body camera and Pruitt's. They took statements from guest after guest. Wesley Brooks described the moment Bennett shoved him back. Harold Vance walked an investigator through his own recording, his hands still trembling. Ruth Williams' voice breaking told them how she had watched her only son driven face down into his wedding cake. Each account matched the next, and each one matched the footage. Naomi gave her statement last. She was calm and precise, the same steel she had shown all day. "He asked them 4 times to slow down," she said. 4 times. I counted. He never raised his voice. He never raised a hand. And they broke him anyway. The investigators wrote it all down. They did not need to embellish. The truth was damning enough. While the statements were taken, Lawson reviewed the body camera footage on a tablet in the back of her sedan. She watched Bennett climb out of his car with his hand already on his belt. She watched him ignore Aaron's calm questions. She heard him say the words that would end his career. "People like you don't just end up in a place like this." Lawson paused the video. She had seen a lot in 18 years. This still made her stomach turn. Then she pulled Bennett's personnel file, and her jaw tightened. It was not his first time. 2 prior complaints sat in the file, both from black men, both alleging the same thing. Bennett moved too fast. He assumed the worst. He listened only after the damage was done. Both complaints had been quietly closed by a supervisor who preferred paperwork to accountability. Both men had walked away believing no one would ever take them seriously. "Not this time," Lawson murmured. Within days, the 2 men whose complaints had been buried came forward on their own. They had seen the video like everyone else, and for the first time, they believed someone might finally listen. Their old reports, pulled from the archive and read aloud, matched the new one almost word for word. The same officer, the same assumptions, the same refusal to slow down. What had once been dismissed as isolated now looked like exactly what it was: a pattern. By then, the story had already left Wexford Hills. The first clip hit the internet within the hour. A guest had live-streamed the arrest,
and the video of a groom in a cream suit being slammed into his own wedding cake spread faster than anyone could contain it. By midnight, it had millions of views. By morning, it led every news broadcast in the country. The headline wrote itself. A neighbor called the cops on a black wedding, and the officers handcuffed the chief of police. The public response was immediate and enormous. People who had never met Aaron Williams felt the injustice in their bones because they recognized it. They had lived versions of it. The footage gave a face to a fear that millions carried quietly every day. Outside police headquarters, a crowd gathered the next afternoon. It was peaceful and determined. They held signs. They sang. They asked one simple question over and over. If this can happen to the chief of police, what happens to the rest of us? Aaron saw the crowd on the news and understood the weight he now carried. This was no longer only his story. It belonged to everyone who had ever been treated like a stranger in a place they had every right to be. The mayor addressed the city the next morning. She called the footage indefensible and promised full cooperation with the investigation. The district attorney went further, announcing that a false police report endangering lives would be prosecuted to the limit of the law. For once, the people watching believed the words might actually mean something. The formal investigation moved quickly because the evidence left little room for doubt. Brenda Caldwell was the first to be interviewed. She arrived at headquarters in a fresh blazer and a lawyer's confidence, ready to explain that she had simply been a frightened woman doing her civic duty. "I felt unsafe," she said. "There was a large gathering. I did not recognize anyone. I made a call. That is my right." Lawson slid a tablet across the table and pressed play. Brenda's own voice filled the room. "Black male. He broke into one of the houses. I think some of them are armed. I am a woman alone." The recording was clear, deliberate, and entirely invented. "There was no break-in," Lawson said. "There was no armed man. You watched a wedding from your patio, and you reported a violent crime that never happened. That is not a frightened call, Ms. Caldwell. That is a false report. And in this state, filing one is a crime." Brenda's confidence cracked. "I may have exaggerated. I was upset." "You did not exaggerate. You fabricated." Lawson leaned forward. "And we have one more thing to discuss. This is not your first call like this either, is it?" The investigators had found it. 2 previous addresses, 2 previous neighborhoods, 2 previous calls about people who did not look like Brenda doing nothing more than existing nearby. A pattern laid bare in black and white. Brenda's lawyer leaned over and whispered. For the first time, she stopped talking. Bennett was interviewed next. He came in with a union representative and a defense he had clearly rehearsed. "I followed protocol. I responded to a call reporting an armed suspect. I acted on the information I was given. Any officer would have done the same." "Let's test that," Lawson said. She played his own body camera footage, and she stopped it at every decision point. "Here," she said, "is the moment Chief Williams identified himself as the homeowner. You did not run the address. Here is the moment he asked you to call your supervisor. You refused. Here is the moment Officer Pruitt told you to wait. You ignored him. Here is the moment you put your hand on a cooperating man and drove him into a table. Protocol did not tell you to do that. You chose it." Bennett's rehearsed calm fell apart, frame by frame. "I did not know who he was." "That is the worst part of your defense," Lawson said. You are telling me that your conduct was acceptable as long as the man was an ordinary citizen. That is exactly the problem. You did not see a citizen. You saw a black man at a nice house, and you decided he must be guilty. The badge does not give you that right. It demands the opposite. Bennett had no answer. His union representative wrote something down and said nothing. Officer Pruitt testified plainly. He confirmed that he had read the same call and felt it was wrong from the start. He confirmed that he had keyed his radio and heard dispatch identify the homeowner. He confirmed that he had told Bennett to wait and that Bennett had ignored him. He did not protect his partner. He protected the truth, and it cost him nothing but the friendship of a man who had earned none of it. Through it all, Aaron refused the easy path. More than one official quietly suggested that the matter could be handled discreetly.
He was the chief, after all. The whole thing could be settled, the records sealed, the embarrassment contained. A few words from him, and Bennett might keep his pension, and Brenda might avoid charges. Aaron said no. "If I make this disappear because of who I am," he told Lawson, "then I prove their point. I prove that the system only works for people with rank. I will not do that. We follow the process exactly as we would for anyone. No special treatment, not for me and not for them." It would have been easy to want revenge. Aaron did not. What he wanted was harder and rarer. He wanted the system to do the thing it so often failed to do. He wanted it to hold itself accountable, in the open, with the whole country watching. So the investigation continued, thorough and transparent. Every piece of footage was logged. Every witness was heard. The 911 recording, the body cameras, the doorbell cameras, and the dozens of guest videos all told one consistent story from a dozen angles with no contradictions. There was no version of events left for Bennett or Brenda to hide behind. Late on the third night, Lawson sat with Aaron in his office. The city outside was still buzzing with the story. She set down her files and looked at him. "You know, this changes things," she said. "Not just for them, for the whole department. People are going to be watching how we handle this for years." "Good," Aaron said. "Let them watch. Maybe the next officer thinks twice. Maybe the next neighbor puts the phone down. Maybe the next family gets to finish their wedding." Lawson allowed herself a small, tired smile. "You should have been able to finish yours." Aaron was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "We will. When this is done, we will." The disciplinary hearing was scheduled for the following week.
It would be held in an open session with the press and the public allowed to attend, exactly as Aaron had insisted. Bennett would face a review board with the power to end his career. Brenda would face the district attorney, who had already announced that filing a false report of this severity would not be ignored. The day before the hearing, Aaron walked through his backyard alone. The cake was long gone. The chairs were stacked. The string lights still hung between the oaks, dark now, waiting. He stood where he had been driven to the ground and looked at the spot for a long time. Then he took the velvet box from his pocket, opened it, and looked at the 2 gold rings that had waited through all of it. The promise was still there. He just had to keep one more first. The hearing room was full before the doors even opened. Reporters lined the back wall. Cameras pointed at the review board. The 2 men whose old complaints had finally been heard sat in the 3rd row. Ruth Naomi Harold and Wesley filled the first, and Aaron sat among them, not as the chief of police, but as the man this had happened to. The evidence took 2 hours to present. The 911 call, the body cameras, the doorbell footage, the dozens of guest videos. By the time the last clip finished,
The room was silent. There was nothing left to argue. The board ruled on Officer Cole Bennett first. The chair read the findings aloud. Excessive force, unlawful arrest, failure to verify. A documented pattern of the same conduct twice buried before. The verdict was unanimous. Officer Bennett, you are hereby terminated from this department effective immediately. Your case is referred to the district attorney for criminal review. Bennett stood, removed his badge, and set it on the table. His hands did not shake this time. They had run out of excuses. He walked out a civilian, and the door closed behind him with a sound like a verdict. The supervisor, who had buried the earlier complaints, was demoted and placed under review. The cover-up had ended too. Brenda Caldwell faced a different room, but the same reckoning. The district attorney charged her with filing a false police report, a serious crime made worse by her claim of an armed intruder. The recording of her own voice was the centerpiece of the case. On top of the criminal charge, Aaron and Naomi filed a civil suit, not for the money, but to put the cost of a false call on the record where it could not be ignored. Brenda's lawyer negotiated, but there was no erasing what she had said. She would answer for it in court, her name now permanently tied to the call she made, the day she decided a wedding did not belong on her street. Then came the part Aaron cared about most. He stood before the board, the press, and the city, and he did not talk about himself. He talked about the system. What happened to me was wrong, he said, but I survived it because of who I am. I had rank. I had witnesses. I had a friend who knew my face. Most people have none of that. They have only the truth, and too often, the truth is not enough. He let that settle. So, we are going to change how we work. The reforms he announced were specific and real. Every officer would complete new training on bias and de-escalation, retested each year. Dispatch would flag vague calls that named only race. Officers responding to a property call would be required to verify ownership before any arrest. Body camera footage in misconduct cases would be released to the public, not hidden behind a wall of process. And an independent review board with civilian members would oversee every complaint, so no future report could ever be quietly buried again.
The badge does not make us right, Aaron said. The truth does. And from now on, this department answers to the truth, no matter whose face is on the wrong end of it. The room rose to its feet. It was not revenge. Aaron had refused revenge from the first hour. Bennett lost his career because of what he did, not because of who Aaron was. Brenda faced charges because she broke the law, not because she had wounded a powerful man. The consequences were heavy, but they were earned, measured out by evidence and process rather than anger. That was the whole point. The system had finally done what it was built to do. Outside, the crowd that had once gathered in protest gathered again. This time, they were not asking a question. They were marking an answer. A wrong had been named in the open and met with something rare: accountability. Aaron stepped out to meet them, Naomi's hand in his. The cameras flashed. The city watched. And for the first time since the sirens cut through his wedding, he felt the weight begin to lift. Not because it was over, but because it had been done right. There was only one thing left undone: a promise made behind a rose arch, a ceremony that had never started on time. 2 gold rings still waiting in a velvet box, for a day that finally belonged to them. Months later, that day came. The backyard looked like a postcard again. The string lights glowed between the oaks. White roses lined the aisle. A new cake stood tall and untouched. And this time, no sirens came. Aaron stood beneath the rose arch in a fresh cream suit, and Naomi walked toward him in her ivory gown, her eyes calm and fearless, exactly as they had always been. Ruth wept in the front row, but these were different tears. When the moment came for the rings, it was Daniel Hayes who stepped forward and placed the velvet box in Aaron's hand. The same box.
The same 2 gold rings. The promise that had survived everything.
"Took you long enough," Aaron whispered. "I'm never late twice," Hayes whispered back. They said their vows in full this time, every word with no one to interrupt. When Aaron kissed his wife, the whole yard erupted, and the music finally played the song that had been cut short months before. Harold Vance was there, clapping harder than anyone. So were the 2 men whose voices had finally been heard. Aaron had started something in the weeks after the hearing, a simple neighbor-to-neighbor program that paired longtime residents with new families so that no one in Wexford Hills would ever again be a stranger on their own street. Harold had been the first to sign up. A letter had come too, weeks earlier. Handwritten, no return address needed. It was from Cole Bennett. He did not ask for his job back or for forgiveness. He only wrote that he had been wrong, that he thought about that day every morning, and that he was trying to become a man who would never do it again. Aaron read it twice, then quietly set it down and nodded. Some doors close. Some people maybe learn. That night, Aaron and Naomi had their first dance under the lights, slow and unhurried, the way it should have been all along. No badge, no cameras, just a husband and a wife and a song. If this story moved you, take a moment to share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment and tell me about a time you saw someone treated unfairly and what you did. Subscribe if you believe stories like this matter, because the next one might be the one that changes how someone sees the world.
I told you a story today, and yes, it was fiction, but the humiliation in it, the assumption of guilt, the feeling of being a stranger in your own home, those are real, and they happen to real people every single day. Aaron survived his because he had rank and witnesses. Most people only have the strangers standing nearby. I did not write this so you would feel angry and move on. I wrote it because the question that matters is not whether this happens. It does. The question is what you and I choose to do the moment we see it. So let me ask you honestly, the next time you witness something like this, will you look away or will you be the one who speaks up?